Let me start the recording here so that if there is any choking on the tea, it will be documented. Man, woo. It's good stuff.
Great way to start a podcast.
My journal from my backpacking trip is a coaster. So, yeah, we'll try not to destroy it if I spill a bunch of tea on it. Not that it matters at this point, but yeah. So what have you been up to? What's new with you?
Just slowly working on training Emmie. Had
that's good.
Consult with a trainer yesterday, finally. So I have a feeling that we're going to end up, or I should say we are going to end up working with her. So she has one of the things that I really want to focus on with Emmie is recall, because obviously that's
that's definitely
the biggest thing.
Definitely an important one. Yeah, especially if you're going to be going off leash with her into some, larger areas and stuff like that.
And I mean, we don't have a fenced in yard at all. And we have 3.5 acres or somewhere around that, 3.5 to 6 acres, plus a bunch of fields and such around us. And not to mention the property that we have up north. I don't want to have her on a leash all the time up there. But in order for that to happen, she needs to have a solid recall. So
that's very, very important. It's like a foundational sort of thing.
Exactly.
For certain.
Yeah. So I was kind of I've never been big on the e-collars or any of that kind of stuff. I don't like the idea of punishing a dog to get them to listen, or startling them or any of that kind of thing. I don't want them to I don't want to be reliant on a tool, but at the same time, I don't want to instill any fear into them through training or any of that. I want them to be able to come to me because they really do enjoy, coming to me. And so this trainer here that we're working with is all about positive reinforcement, doesn't use any e-collars or prong collars, any of that kind of stuff, which aligns with my kind of thinking with this kind of stuff. So, so we'll see how it all goes about. We're going to end up doing 6 weeks with her. I don't know if it's going to be every week or if it's every other week. We haven't figured out the logistics of that yet, but she did come over for an hour and a half or so yesterday and worked with Emmie, gave us some tips and tricks, how to go about working with her now, and then we'll be able to build on that and really delve into it deeper together. Yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much my latest and greatest news.
Well, that's good, because when we got Oliver, he was 1 year old, had no training, and it's our first dog. My wife, when she was growing up, they had a dog, but back in communist Russia, when she was a kid, dogs were treated differently then. They're not as much, a member of the family. They're not as much.
They're not companions in that sense.
They're not companions in the same way. They're not trained to the same level. And obviously, when you're a kid, you're not in charge of training the dog anyway. So, so we got a trainer that we worked with for Oliver, and it worked out really well. I think it was over the course of it was probably somewhere between a month and a half, something like that, where we'd go over there once a week, and we'd have homework of improving certain skills, whether it's recall or sit, or how long they would be able to stay there and all that sort of stuff. And it was kind of expensive because it was a one-on-one thing, but at the same time, we were more so me because since I'm working from home, it's stressful when you get a new dog.
Yes, definitely.
And it can make life so much more difficult at first until you kind of get everything dialed in, and then it's great. But yeah, it was definitely worthwhile. And as a result, we could be, so here in San Diego, there's this one really large off-leash dog area called Fiesta Island. Really, really, really big area. And my wife and I will go there and we'll kind of start together, but then we'll kind of like start running in like opposite directions. First of all, it's just to see, you know, who the dog would run after, like who the dog likes more kind of thing, you know? Yeah. And so eventually though, we're just sending him back and forth, you know, between us, and we're like, I don't know, like a football field apart from each other. And so it was just funny to see this little dog just like low to the ground, just hauling, you know, just, you see him just come right towards you like he's flying, you know, grabs a little treat, then takes off back the other way. So he was really good with the recall. You can shout his name from across the field and he'll come running, which is really good. But that was a result of the training that we did, and it was certainly a very, very good investment.
I've been talking over the course of the last 2 weeks or so with various trainers doing phone consultations and that kind of thing, trying to figure out who to go with. And then I found this lady, and she actually works with, so prior to Emmie and Lucy, we had Maggie, who was a German short-haired pointer. And German short-haired pointers are very much so high energy, like off the wall, lunatic kind of dogs. Like, Maggie was the epitome of an asshole dog because she was not very well trained, like at all. She was stubborn. She had a high prey drive, and she had a lot of energy. And so she did what she wanted to do, and she didn't care about what you wanted from her. And of course, like I said, that's very much so a result of the lack of training that was done around her. I was not in the right mind space to deal with her and to work with that, nor was I like old enough to really care, because I was like, what was I, like 14 when we got her, something like that. And my mom was working, my dad was doing some like various odd jobs at the time. He was between jobs, so he was the one home with her all the time. And my dad is not like a dog person. He's not huge on dogs. If we didn't have one, he wouldn't care. And so what really drew me to this trainer in particular when I finally found her was the fact that she is now on her 7th and 8th GSP.
Oh.
And they are like great, or perfectly trained. They are agility dogs. She does a lot of work.
So she can work wonders with them.
Exactly my thinking. Yes. Yeah. I saw that she works with them, and she has them like a really, really solid recall with them. I'm like, if you can do that, then Emmie should be a breeze.
Yeah.
I mean, Emmie has like a lot of energy. She has a high prey drive and everything, especially because of the poodle in her. And I'm like, if you can work the same, or teach us how to work the same magic that you did with your dogs for Emmie, that's great. Like, if I don't have to worry about her like running off and disappearing, and like, that's my biggest concern. So, and not to mention her prices are, for private training, are really, really reasonable.
That's good. Like,
you're talking $90 an hour, and it gets less if you do like a bulk sign up for 6 sessions at once. You get, it's like $450. I'm like, that's compared to some of these other trainers that I was talking to that are like $1,200, $2,000 for private training for maybe 8 weeks instead of 6, but still, like, you're looking then at like $200 each lesson. Like, that's a little bit much, but
yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Hopefully the best, as long as we put the effort into it and really get on it. Just, but.
Yeah. That'll, it's certainly an important part of the whole process. And, just like I was saying, it's the sort of thing where, you start out with all these, issues where, the dog's doing one thing, you want to do something else. And you just start whittling that list down to the point where at some point, it's just everything's going well. And actually we're at that point with Oliver. The last thing that we've been working with him for was him barking at the rats in the backyard. And so finally I had heard from someone who had, it's one of the collars you put on the dog where if they bark, then it'll make a sound and it'll buzz. It's not a shock collar, but just like the little buzzy collar.
Okay.
And it's just, they find that to be a little bit unpleasant when they bark. So they just, don't bark as much. And that has actually changed his behavior, where, he can go, he now has access to the doggy door 24 hours a day, and he might hear a rat outside. So he'll go out there. It might be 3 a.m, but he'll just make his little like growling kind of
his
sounds.
Grumbles.
Yeah, exactly. He'll just do his little grumbles, and then he'll come back inside and he's like, okay, I'm good. And so hopefully at some point that will just be reinforced to the point where we don't even have to use the collar. But until then, it's been a miracle worker, and now he has access to the backyard 24/7, where he can go do whatever he needs to do, but he doesn't start barking at 3 a.m, waking up the neighbors. So, but yeah, so that's the last thing we've been working on. Other than that, he's been great. No separation anxiety. He doesn't chew anything he's not supposed to. He gets along with the cats, so he's been doing very well in that regard.
Yeah. Luckily, Emmie hasn't been too bad with chewing stuff. The last thing that she chewed up was while I was away in the Palouse, and I think fiance was at work at the time. My mom woke up and opened up the door to the in-law suite where Emmie was on the steps, and going up the steps, I typically have Christmas lights wrapped around everything, because that way we use them as like a night light, so I don't trip down the stairs in the middle of the night if she needs to go out or whatever. And they're the ones that like dangle a bit, so they touch some of the stairs and she can reach them. And she decided at that point that I really miss Dad and I really miss Mom, and Gam Gam isn't waking up and coming to get me.
I'm gonna chew on these.
So I'm gonna chew on these. And but besides that, and besides like tissues, she loves destroying tissues. She so far hasn't been too terrible with that kind of stuff, but yeah, so that's Emmie's training stuff. But
yeah,
other than that,
that's good. That'll be a bit of a work in progress. So I was thinking back to some of the other trail thoughts that I had on my my spring backpacking trip, and there was something I was thinking about, how when it comes to photography, people get really obsessed with gear, in which, I get it. It's a blend of that combined with, everything else involved, but there is this obsession with it. And one of the things that I was thinking of, how to, why is that the case with photography? And I came down to a very, a simple thought along those lines. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, but I think for a photographer, there is a feeling that the camera should feel special in your hand. And I think for some people, that is because it's something new and it's something that's the latest and the greatest, and therefore it feels special as a result. Or perhaps it's because it's something very old, something antique, something that has sentimental value, perhaps. There's that middle range where it doesn't really, it seems like the cameras just don't really resonate much with people. Or in the case of like with large format, the process itself seems to make that camera special in a way, just because it's process oriented. But I was thinking that maybe that is one of the things that explains why there is so much obsession with gear, almost like it's like a musical instrument. If it's something that has sentimental value, if it's something that is new, that gets you excited to go out and work with it, that's one thing. But if it's that old guitar that's been sitting around where it's not old enough, it's maybe it's just not quite as exciting to pick up. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
You can almost equate it to using a nice pen, or like driving a nice car, using a nice paintbrush, any of that kind of thing, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, there are these pens that I use that I absolutely love lately, and they're just Papermate Inkjoy gel pens. And little, like, at least in my opinion, expensive for what they are, but at the end of the day, not terrible. I have a bunch of them, and I use them for all of my writing. I'm using them now for taking notes as we're talking. Yeah. And it just makes the experience of writing that much nicer. And I think the same can be said when you find a camera that just works very well for you, or like you said, that has that different process behind it, like large format or with film, or that has some kind of sentimental value. Maybe it was your Greek grandfather's old Leica that he used in the war or something like that, whatever it is. I definitely do think that perhaps that's not... There's kind of a line, or a dividing line, as I see it with this, where there's the obsession over gear, and within that is the enjoyment of nice quality things. Like for me, the preferring the Fuji, the GFX over the Sony or the Nikon that I used and that kind of deal. And then there's the other side of it where it's the process, but also the sentimental value and the camera feeling special in some way. I think there are two almost separate conversations, because the latter isn't necessarily obsession. It's more of the enjoyment aspect of that specialness, so to speak. Whereas the former is more where the obsession lies, where you're looking for certain qualities in the camera and that you're not always going to get every single one of them, you know?
Yeah. And I was also thinking in terms of so my experience for video, and since I, do a fair amount of video when I'm on the trips, and I work with those cameras more than I work with, my still camera. I don't have that feeling when it comes to the video, which is weird. So I use it's a Sony A7S II. I bought it used in 2018 is when I bought it used. So it's a camera that came out at least a year or so before then, because it had been on the market maybe for a couple years, few years or something like that before I bought it. And, I got it for a decent price. It was great shape. I have no emotional attachment to it. I don't necessarily feel like it's special. It just gets the job done. It's just a thing. And the same thing is for the little camera I use on the backpacking trips, the Sony CV1. It's just kind of a thing, I don't have that attachment to it. If something happens to it, I don't care. I can replace it. It's no big deal. So it is interesting how for video, I don't have that feeling. But for still photography, I do have this need to feel like what I'm working with is special, even though when it comes down to the core of it, it's same thing, finding a composition, having decent light. There's certainly more thought going into still photography than the video side of thing. But I just thought that was interesting, that from a video standpoint, it's a thing. I don't really care. It's old, but it's not like it's an antique, I don't have an emotional attachment to it. It's just a thing. But for still photography, there's a definite difference.
We can equate that right back like I was a little bit earlier with driving, though. Like if you drive all day long, if that's your career, you want to be driving in something that's nice, that's comfortable, that feels good, that just increases that enjoyment of the experience. Yeah. Whereas if you just drive to the gym like me, I only drive really to the gym or to the campgrounds or whatever. Yeah. I don't care what the hell I'm driving. You can give me an old you can give me an old an Oldsmobile or something and I'll be okay. I'll make it as long as it gets me from point A to point B. But I think cameras can be the same way, where for you with video, you only care about the end result. You only care about the video or the camera getting you from point A to point B. Whereas with the photography aspect of it, you want to be enjoying every single second of that experience, and having a nice camera that it may mean something special to you or feels good in your hand. That's where that obsession can bring everything together, and it just elevates that experience because you're paying more attention to it each step of the way too.
And I think as you're saying that, I was thinking about how I think with video, the creation of what you're, the when you're creating it, it's in the editing. You're not creating it in the field. You're just gathering stuff. You don't really know how it's going to go together. You have a rough feeling of what you need, but you're not that process where everything clicks into place, where you have the flow and where you're creating something that conveys what you're feeling. That process is all done on the computer after the fact. Whereas when I'm gathering the video in the field, it's more of just, I don't know what the word would be to describe it, but it's just, it is what it is. It doesn't feel all that special necessarily. It's just an obligation, feels like perhaps. But when I'm taking a photo, when I'm setting up a composition, when I'm working under the ground glass, especially when I click the shutter, that's the moment where I feel like I'm creating something. And so perhaps that is what is at play here. Because I think that moment when you're creating something, you need to feel like what you're working with is special, perhaps, so it doesn't get in the way. So I don't know, maybe for video, maybe it's like feel like the video editing software is special. I don't know how that translates, but there's a distinction there.
No, yeah, I could definitely see where I could see the video editing software. Like if you tried to edit it in, I don't do video, so I can't really speak on video software itself, but in a lower grade free or freemium software versus what you're using now, the experience could be completely different. Or you could go from, so it'll still get you from point A to point B, but it might take twice as long, or the experience itself isn't going to be nearly as nice.
Yeah. And I think also that whole thing of it feeling special might also be another way of saying it's thoughtless, it's natural. There is a flow state that's going on. And I think perhaps that's also part of it. Because if, when I'm working with a large format camera, I'm not really thinking about things. I'm just, reaching for knobs, turn things, focusing things, adjusting things. You don't really think about it. And that, in the same way, is like working with the videos, not really thinking about it, just knowing subtle directions that things need to go, and then you're in the process of making it. So I think the other thing too is when it comes to cameras and stuff like that, is that, it would have to be something, in order to have that feeling of being special, have to be something that it doesn't get in the way of the process. I think that's also another big distinction there, whether it's the software or the camera or anything along those lines. But I do think it's something that, people end up chasing when it comes to, some new camera comes out, and they, start chasing that because they thought, this will, be that next thing. I don't know. So when you were getting into photography, did you have any like earlier digital cameras like that would be considered very, very old now? Do you still have any of those, or do you have any of them at all? Or so how's that work out? Because digital's been obviously around for a while now. Like in my experience, my first digital was like an 0.3 megapixel camera, so it was way back. You had to dodge dinosaurs. So there would be some sentimental. If I still had any of those, there'd be some sentimental effect to it, but it wouldn't be anything I'd ever actually want to use.
Yeah.
But I think by the time you were, working with the stuff, things were already pretty good by then.
Yeah. The oldest camera that I still have I actually have it in my hands right now. It's a Nikon Coolpix S9100. Okay. It's a little like point and shoot kind of thing. I don't think there's any true manual functionality to it. 12 megapixels. With a 4.5 to 81 millimeter zoom lens. It's something that I will always keep, and I used it a little bit. The idea originally, prior to getting the Ricoh, was that I was going to use that as my carry around camera, and like general point and shoot kind of documentational thing. And it's not terrible, but technology has, of course, advanced quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And the simple fact that it's maybe equivalent to a 24 millimeter lens, and that's way wide for me. So, and there were other things that I didn't care about it, but like not being able to have full good autofocus, not being able to have full manual control.
Yeah.
But again, it's
pretty basic.
It's pretty much my first digital camera that I had. Prior to that was all just like those little disposable film cameras that you picked up for like a family trip. So
yeah, I've seen some stuff. It's interesting where there are people, younger generation that are having some degree of nostalgia towards some of the early digital cameras, kind of like that, in a way that, we see that there's been like the resurgence of vinyl or, cassettes or stuff like that. I don't really get it when it comes to, I don't see that as a trend that will end up playing out, just because things are better. But I would also imagine that, there's people that grew up shooting, maybe, I don't think people necessarily grew up shooting large format, but when say people were working in an industry shooting large format, and they're like, oh, there's no way I'd go back to that. So I think, it's different perspectives on that, but it's not like they're really gaining anything by, working with some old point and shoot. But I guess everything has to come around full circle. It's just the way that things work in that regard. But
yeah, I mean,
I don't have any of the old digitals or anything like that. If I had, I'd be like, oh, that's cool. And I'd look at it and I'd probably have no real attachment to it.
Yeah. I don't know if I have my first DSLR still. If I do, it's probably down in the basement right now, because it doesn't seem to be on the shelf with the rest of my old film cameras and various decor at this point, because most of them you can't get film for, or it's too expensive too, and I would never use them anyway. But the second DSLR that I had, the Nikon D7200, that I sold off at some point, because like you said, there comes a time where the sentimentality aspect of it is great, but realistically, just like with this Coolpix for me, I'm not going to use it. Like, it's not going to be done for any serious work, and it just it's the only reason why I keep this one is because it has that sentimental value, and on top of that, it's not worth anything.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too, because like when I had a lot of the digital stuff, you buy whatever is new, and then the old one's sitting there like, well, this will be worth $3 in 5 years, so I might as well get rid of it now, So I have no real attachment to old stuff. I don't know if you do at all, but like if I have like old stuff sitting around, like to me, it's just stuff, I enjoy getting rid of stuff. So I've never been one to understand the collector mentality, but I know that some people have an attachment to stuff.
There's certain things for me, like I still have my certain like video game consoles. I still have older consoles. I still have a PS2, and I plan on getting a PS3 and a PlayStation 1 just because I have old games for both of those systems that I'd like to play again. And there are other things that I have that I'll just keep, not as a collector's mentality so much as just I'll use them at some point, even if I only use them maybe once a year, once every other year. They're still getting used, so it makes sense enough for me to keep. Versus with cameras, I'll just get rid of them. Like there's no point. Like I've been delaying on it for no good reason, just besides forgetting. The RB67 that I still have, the Pro SD, I still have that sitting on my shelf. It's not been used in almost a year at this point, maybe a little bit less, but regardless, I'm gonna get rid of it. It's just when I get around to it, but there's no reason for me to have it because it's collecting dust, and I just want to get rid of it. So,
cool. Yeah. So what else is new with you? Anything else?
Slowly getting back into reading and writing, and also pickleball.
Pickleball, yeah. I've yet to partake.
Yeah, I think I mentioned when we were finished recording last week that when my fiance and I started playing a little bit with some of her coworkers. Now that school's out and everything, we all have a little bit more free time. So we were over at the courts. Maybe this was like 2 weeks ago, something like that. And there are certain, like, I'm not a very athletic individual. I'm not heavily competitive. I'm not big into sports in general. But there are certain times where I'll just go a little bit harder than I should or is necessary. And with pickleball, that's one of those times because I just get into it and it's one of those sports that I know that I'm pretty good at. And I just enjoy myself like going a little bit harder than what everybody else does, especially because of the workout aspect of it. So,
do you show up like wear like sweatbands and stuff or?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I just move around more. I dive for
lots of stretching before you start playing.
Yeah. Lots of stretching, lots of short shorts, and like it's not you can't call it the tennis grunt, but it's like the pickleball grunt, and like, screaming as you hit it, and just no. But at one point, the ball was coming over the net. And I like kind of half dove for it. And mind you, you're not playing on grass or anything. You're playing on like a tennis court.
Cement, right?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. It's a little bit softer than cement. And I scraped up my knee and maybe like a quarter, the size of a quarter, or maybe like a little bit smaller than $50. For those who actually know what a $50 size is.
Yeah.
I just have like this scrape that it's slowly starting to heal and it looks better, but
that's annoying. I hate that kind of stuff because it takes a long time to heal. It's just like, oh, come on. Yeah. It's just a reminder.
And then on top of that, like you get what they call slaw, which is just gross. It's the slightly white coating that goes over it, that grows over it, that like protects it, and then you have to like scrape it off, and it's just
It's all the people eating right now.
Yes.
They're eating their breakfast, looking down at their scrambled eggs and their bacon, and just
yeah, delicious, wonderful. Yeah. But back towards more creative topics. Yes, I have been getting more into my reading, into my writing. So yesterday, the Dodge and Burn #2 finally came out. So that has been published. That's getting me into writing more, which is good.
That's good because that's something where having those deadlines will force the issue.
Yes. And I have still plenty of topics that I need to write about and will be writing about, centered around the Palouse and my thoughts while there, that kind of deal. And then in the reading aspect, I finally finished after about 2 months of struggling to get through it. And it was a denser book, at least for me, but it's The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, I believe. And it just delves into, it discusses, like, as Wikipedia here says, the psychological and philosophical implications for how people and cultures have reacted to the concept of death. The author argues most human action is taken to ignore or avoid the inevitability of death. And
I mean, that's why I wear a bicycle helmet.
Yeah, exactly. So throughout the book, he is talking about like Freud and all these other well-known individuals who've brought on different concepts. It was not at all what I was expecting the book to be. Which I'm still uncertain whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I wonder if that's why it took me so long to get through it as well. But
I could see that if it's a matter of, I don't know. I could see how if it's not what you were thinking, I see how in some cases you could be like, oh, I'm diving right in, and other times like, I'm not sure if this is what I was getting into. You know, I can see how that can go either way.
Yeah. I mean, it's especially when you compare that to, so when I told Guy Tall that I was reading this book, he recommended that afterwards I read a book from E.M. Chorin, a well-known pessimistic and nihilist philosopher who wrote a book called The Trouble with Being Born. And it's a book of aphorisms, so short paragraphs, short sentences, not really chunked into chapters, but a lot of, I suppose, loose thoughts around various ideas, and they all culminate around death in some form or another. Again, not exactly a book that I was expecting it to be as it was, but I read it in like a day, like 2 days. and totally different appreciation for that book versus Becker's. Not to say that either are bad or better than the other, but nonetheless. So now I am going to be switching gears a little bit away from philosophy, at least for one book, and I'm going to be reading Colleen Minnick's latest book that just came out.
Yeah, I remember seeing the video she had posted when she had all the pallets of them delivered and popping them open, and that looks like that'll be a pretty interesting book.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Flipping through it, it looks like it was printed and created very nicely. Some photographs in it that I always like. A lot of books, a lot of paperback books, when you get them or when you're looking through them and they have photographs in them, they're always printed on like actual photo paper or some other kind of like glossy paper.
Yeah.
That just ruins the tactile feel of flipping through the book. It stands out so much greater than the rest of the pages.
Yeah.
With this, that's not the case, and I'm very glad to see that, especially since the photographs still look very nice throughout the book.
But it's more cohesive and more integrated in with everything.
Exactly. It's the same paper all throughout the book, which is just nice from the tactile sense of things. So I'm expecting to rip through that pretty quick because of the content and because I'm very interested to read about it. So
yeah. I mean, I'm hearing you read about all these like philosophical things and all that, and I was just thinking about my experience because I started doing a little bit more reading over the past couple of weeks. So it's been pretty hot here, and so I decided to go back and reread Jurassic Park because first time I read that I was in like 6th grade or something like that, and it was a pretty hot day. It was on a weekend, and I remember so I have it on the Kindle, and I remember telling my wife I'm going to go out in the hammock and do a little reading. And so, I mean, it's a hot day, so I'm just stripped down to my underpants. So I just go out and lay in the hammock, and since we don't have a pool, I had the hose there. So I just kind of like, spray myself down with some water every now and then just to cool off a little bit. And so I was just thinking, this is a good life. Just going to go in the hammock in my underpants, read about dinosaurs, and that's about the extent of my reading, which I do highly recommend. It worked out quite well. At some point, Oliver joined me as well. So I'm like, this is a good life. This is a good life. So yeah.
There are a bunch of fiction books that I have too, and I want to get through all of them, of course, but most of my reading revolves around nonfiction because I love learning and I love following my curiosity around certain subjects. Like I just picked up today, my fiance, my mom, and I went out to 2 different yard sales that my mom wanted to check out, which were disappointments, but they almost always are anyway, because it's just a bunch of people's old junk that they don't want.
Yeah, just stuff that they don't want throw away.
Exactly. Yeah, they think that they can get 50 cents for it, so they figure it's worth it.
Let's haggle with strangers over pennies.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm like, I'd rather just throw it away.
Exactly. Yes. Donate the books that you have instead of just trying to get a couple of dollars from them. Mm-hmm. But we went out, and then we went to the mall, and of course at the mall there's Barnes & Noble, there's a bookstore, and of course a bookstore is the greatest thing about this bookstore is that it was just redone, and it looks absolutely phenomenal. Like it is so much nicer than the one that we go to regularly. And but besides that, I found 2 different books that I picked up. One was The Essential Arthur Schopenhauer, and
not familiar.
He's another philosopher. Another one that Guy Toll recommended me to, and so I liked some of the quotes that he had shared and some of his various thinkings. Obviously don't have any thoughts on him at the moment, but regardless, I picked up that, so now I have 2 of his books to read. And I also picked up what I thought was interesting is a book of Japanese death poems, which...
Interesting.
Of course, everyone listening, everyone here...
All 5 of
us. We all know how my mind has been wrapped around death the past year at this point. And so when I saw this, I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. Like, these are all poems that various poets have written shortly before they died.
Are any of them incomplete? Like, they were just like...
No, so it's...
80% of the way through, and then they're like, that's it?
No, so it's actually a tradition that they had. I don't know if they continued doing it or if it eventually died out, but it was a tradition in Japan among poets to write a poem specifically around their death, in their days of dying, or shortly beforehand. Of course, that's like, it's tough if you die of a heart attack. Like, how do you know? Like,
yeah.
Do you just get a sense that you're going to die the next? Like, yeah. So, of course, I'm not too familiarized with it, but again, death and my thinkings around it, a curiosity around how we feel about death and why we are so afraid of it or attracted to it in a sense. But yeah, I don't know. But most of my reading, like I said, follows around that curiosity aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I can rip through fiction books really quick, especially, of course, if they're good ones. And there are a lot that I have, but my mind is so wrapped up on, like, memoirs, especially. I love, like, what Colleen just put out. Like, to be able to get inside the head of somebody else and to be able to understand, like, their motivations and their reasonings, where they got to where they are.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me. But
yeah. But so are dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are also fascinating. And imagine writing a death poem if like a velociraptor is hunting you down.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're just...
That would be very difficult.
Just imagine even worse, like if a dinosaur just has you, like, is eating you from the legs up, and you're just writing.
I don't have too much time for this.
Yeah, you're just scribbling down quick, like a death poem, like short little like haiku or something, just like eaten by a dinosaur.
Yeah,
like, please, I hope this dinosaur doesn't eat this too, because otherwise it won't get out there.
Roses are red, violets are blue. Dinosaurs eating me, and probably this too. I don't know.
There you go. That's probably, there you go. That's perfect.
Probably the extent of it. Yeah,
that was the first poem ever written by a Neanderthal, eaten by a dinosaur.
Yes, I think the timeline's a little.
Yeah, I was going to say the timeline doesn't exactly add up, but it's close enough. It's fine.
Yeah,
what's a little bit more misinformation out in the world?
Yeah. So who's our artist of the week?
So this week we have Benjamin Everett, and Benjamin is a little bit different of a photographer than what traditionally is thought of when you think of landscape work. He actually started out in painting. That's where his background is. And then he came along to photography. I can't necessarily remember when, like his timeline or anything, but he now kind of mixes the traditions, as he says in his About page, of photography and painting. He goes on to say his images are captured through extensive travel and wilderness experience combined with skill and sculptural experimentation. And he does add a little bit about his process. So he goes on, beginning in the field, Benjamin searches out unique locations that lend themselves to creative play. He then collects a series of detailed photographs that represent fascinations with some unique aspect of a location, light on form, texture, color, or composition. Often these details are symbolic of natural forces or the synchronicity. I'm just going to butcher that word. Synchronicity of repeated themes unique to a location. Later in the studio, these collected elements become the foundation for play and interactivity, a way to engage and re-experience a scene. The final image functions much like the landscape of memories or dreams, an abstraction where multiple moments combine, scale and time transform. That sounds weird. Where multiple moments combine, scale and time transform. Yeah, that's not written right. But anyway, I found Benjamin's work many, many years ago when I was first starting out with landscape photography. I want to say it was around 2016 or 17 that I came across his work on Instagram. And I've always been fascinated with it because a lot of these, or I should say the majority of these, are just pieced together landscapes. None of these places are actually entirely real.
Yeah, there's definitely a composite, painterly, and also kind of a surrealist look to them.
Yes. He is doing like a lot. If you go onto his Instagram page, so his Instagram page is Benjamin, so Bejamin, and at least his 2 latest posts, he actually has a little video, a time-lapse video of his process, in a sense, which goes to show just like what amazes me about his work is, and I have the first one that he had posted, or the most recent one that he had posted. I have that one playing.
I'm looking at that same one.
I mean, just to see all those elements, those various elements, and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to create. And being able to realize that from just the get-go, or from start to finish, or even just looking through your archives and being like, or coming up to a scene even more, saying, okay, I just want these mountains and this light. And that's going to be something in my photograph in the end result. I mean, that's what just blows me away with his work, is the ability to see so creatively, so uniquely, and put something together that is as beautiful as what he's done for all of his work.
And what he's doing, it is done with purpose.
Yes.
As compared to when you see a lot of composite work on Instagram, where it's more so just trying to make something look better than it does, more impressive than it does, where it's going to stand out more, where like people are like stretching mountains or doing all kinds of stuff like that. But it's kind of it's a very coarse way of doing that. It's not a very finely detailed way. It's not done with purpose. The stuff that Benjamin is doing looks more like there is an image in his mind that he wants to create. So he finds all the pieces and he meticulously puts it together, and is also transparent about that, as opposed to a person who just takes a scene but wants it to stand out on the gram, and to get like the social media, whatever dopamine hits or whatever. So it looks like he's taking this from a more of a true artist perspective, which is nice.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are some photographers out there who do like time blending, or like they'll manipulate the focal blending. They'll do time blending or focal blending in order to try and make it more realistic to how they saw it, because of different compression of lenses and that kind of thing. But that's definitely different than what Benjamin is doing, and he is creating art in a totally different sense rather than just straight photographs. The only sort of like contestment I've ever had with his work, and it's not necessarily because of him, and he won I think it was the 2016 or the 2018 Hasselblad Masters Award, which he won it for landscape photography. Which I'm kind of like, is it really landscape photography?
And I guess it depends on which images were entered in, because there's some of the images of places that I know, like for example, there's one from Zion where it looks like it just is what it is. Like it doesn't look like it's actually the result of like any sort of crazy manipulation, because it's a scene from the observation point, and it's just on a little bit of a hazy day, late afternoon. I'm like, that's probably mostly how it looked, just with a little bit of stylization of opening up the shadows and stuff like that. But that looks to be a not far from the original. Certainly some of the other scenes you can tell are composites just because of the scale, but some of them also could just be that is what it is, and perhaps those were the images that were more so entered. But without seeing the entries, I obviously don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, like I said, that's more of a contestment with the awards themselves rather than it is with Benjamin. I mean, He is
his work doesn't really necessarily fit in a particular category.
Exactly. Yes. But yeah, I mean, just take a minute or a couple minutes and just look through his various galleries. Just beautifully done work. And with the realization too, and this is perhaps one of the most important aspects, he is very open about the fact that these are digital. These are like digitally manipulated. These are not straight photographs in any sense. Like his whole process, he's always been open about that, which I respect a lot more than the person who just uses various compositional techniques or compositing techniques and tries to manipulate the viewer into thinking that this is real life.
Now, have you scrolled all the way to the bottom of his Instagram?
I have not, no.
I'd be curious to hear your thoughts if you go all the way to the bottom, because you're going to see a change in the work.
So I'm not able to because of not having an account.
Okay. So some of the oldest stuff he has in there are from 2013. Looks like the first post was on April 11th, 2013. Those ones have a bit of a little bit of an overcooked look to them.
Okay.
Where I think, but that was also a little bit more of what was the style at that point in time, kind of the earlier Instagram things jumping out. And you can tell that he was I don't know how long he's been doing photography, but you can definitely see his growth as an artist by looking at the early work. I'm actually very impressed that he's keeping all those up there, because it's not the same caliber of work as he does now. I mean, it's quite a bit different. And then it looks like, if I keep scrolling up, there's a lot of stuff, looks like it's from Hawaii or other places of travels. And I'd say that he gets closer to his more recent style, I'd say around 2015 is when I start to see things get a little bit more refined, but they're still mostly landscape pictures of pretty places. Mm-hmm. And then I'd say if I keep scrolling, once I get to sort of the more composite looking stuff is actually a fairly recent, scrolling up. So it looks like actually once we get to around 2016 and then more towards, around middle of 2016 is where it looks like his current style more so emerges. And then that holds true pretty much to the current stuff. So it's very interesting to see that evolution of an artist, the evolution of style. And it's really cool to see the early work, because you can see that progression in a way that is otherwise perhaps a little bit difficult to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely a very, very good selection. I definitely encourage people to, assuming you have the ability to, scroll all the way down to the bottom and just look at that progression, because it's like you're seeing his vision take place as you scroll higher and higher.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a very good suggestion.
Yeah, he's someone else that I want to have collaborate on the magazine with, whether it be an interview or writing an article. Especially with AI being so prevalent, I'd really be curious about his take and how that's affecting his work. He was, when I first contacted him about it, he's kind of like on the fence about it because of the work that he creates, and he doesn't want to stir the pot in that kind of sense, which, I mean, I totally understand. But at the same time, he's already doing it.
Yeah, and I guess that's actually I hadn't really thought about it from the AI angle. But looking at his recent work, it's in a very similar style to what you see coming from the AI stuff. In particular, there's this picture he posted on January 28th, 2021 of this tree that has this very almost a kidney shape in terms of the way all the branches are. And that looks actually a lot like some of the AI stuff that I've seen in the early days of it. So that is a question when it comes to that, where if you're the style that you've taken all this time to adapt or to create and work hard, and then also to know that you're very easily replaceable by a computer, that's not a very comforting thought.
No, not at all.
Yeah. But absolutely beautiful work, and I definitely encourage people to check him out, and I just gave him a follow. Not that he'll notice because he has 457,000 followers, but I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe he will. Yeah.
Yes. I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com. And you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.